In February 1978, 5 friends drove into the California mountains to watch a basketball game. They never came home. Their car was found abandoned on a remote forest road engine. No footprints leading away, no sign of a struggle. 4 months later, searchers found 4 of the men dead, scattered across 11 miles of wilderness. One had survived alone in a locked cabin for months, starving next to enough food to last a year. The 5th man was never found. Not his body, not his bones, not a single trace. This is the case of the Yuba County Five. And the more investigators dug, the less it looked like 5 men who simply got lost. It looked like 5 men who were being watched. February 24th, 1978, Yuba City, California. 5 friends were getting ready for the biggest week of their year. Ted Wire laid his uniform out the night before. Jackie Hewitt asked his mother to make sure he was up on time. These weren't small details to them, they mattered. Because that week, their basketball team, the Gateway Gators, was playing in a special Olympics tournament. If they win, they'd get a free trip to Los Angeles. The 5 of them, Ted Wire, Jack Madruga, Bill Sterling, Jackie Hewitt, and Gary Mathias, weren't just teammates. They were the closest thing each other had to a brotherhood. Each lived with his parents. Each carried some kind of intellectual disability or psychiatric diagnosis. And each was, in his own quiet way, looked after by the other 4. Their families had a name for them, collectively, the boys. Not out of condescension, out of love. That night, before their own tournament began, the boys decided to drive up to Chico to cheer on a college team they liked. Jack Madruga drove, one of only 2 in the group with a license, piloting his turquoise and white 1969 Mercury Montego 50 miles north through the cool Sacramento Valley night. They watched the game. UC Davis won. Then they did something completely ordinary. They stopped at a corner store for snacks. The clerk remembered them, mostly because there were 5 of them crowding into her store minutes before closing, delaying the one thing she wanted, which was to go home. That was the last confirmed sighting of all 5 men together, acting like themselves. By morning, they hadn't come home. Their families called the police, and that's where the story should have ended. A short delay, a car with engine trouble, boys who lost track of time. Except nothing about what came next made any sense at all. Days later, a forest ranger recalled seeing a car matching Madruga's description parked along a remote dirt road in Plumas National Forest, nearly 70 miles from Chico, in almost the opposite direction of home. When deputies found it, the scene inside told a story that contradicted itself at every turn. Wrappers from the food they'd bought in Chico, ticket stubs from the game, a road map folded neatly, like someone had put it away with care, not panic. The car was stuck in a snowdrift. Tire tracks showed the wheels had been spun, trying to escape it. But the snow wasn't deep. 5 healthy young men should have been able to rock that car free or simply push it out in minutes. They didn't. The keys were missing, which suggested a mechanical failure. A car they'd abandoned, meaning to return. Except when police hot-wired it, the engine caught immediately. A quarter tank of gas still sat in the reserve. And then the detail that unsettled investigators more than any other. They towed the Mercury in for inspection and found the undercarriage completely clean. No dents, no scrapes, not even mud on the muffler. That is not possible on a road that rough, driven by someone unfamiliar with its ruts and blind curves, unless the driver knew that road intimately. Jack Madruga had never been to these mountains in his life. The search that followed was swallowed almost immediately by one of the worst storms of the season. Snowcats sent to comb the area nearly got lost themselves. After 2 days, the search was called off. The mountains went quiet, but 2 witnesses came forward in those early weeks with accounts that still, to this day, don't fit cleanly into any explanation. The first was a man named Joseph Shones. Purely by coincidence, he had been near that same stretch of road, the same freezing night, checking on his cabin before a ski trip. His own car got stuck in the snow, then alone in the dark. He felt the crushing pain of a heart attack beginning in his chest, lying in his car, fighting to stay conscious. Sean saw headlights approaching from behind. A vehicle pulled up. People got out. He thought he saw a woman holding a baby. He called out for help. The voices stopped. The lights went dark. He called again. Flashlights, further off this time, clicked off one by one. Shones would later say he wasn't certain of anything he saw that night. He was delirious with pain, slipping in and out of consciousness. But doctors confirmed the heart attack was real. And what he described, people present, aware enough to hear him, choosing silence and darkness instead of helping a dying stranger, never sat right with anyone who knew the boys. Ted Wire's mother put it simply. Helping people who needed it wasn't a foreign concept to her son. It was who he was. If it had been them at that car, she said, they would have helped. So who was in the dark, ignoring a dying man's voice? The second account came from a small store in Brownsville, 30 miles from where the Mercury sat abandoned. The exact direction the road would have led had someone kept walking. A clerk there told police that, the day after the boys vanished, 4 men matching their description came into her store. 2 waited outside by a payphone. 2 came in and bought food. She was certain of what she saw. So was the store owner. And when investigators pressed Ted Wire's family, the detail rang true in a way that chilled them. Wire, they said, would eat anything put in front of him. Hewitt hated phones so much his own brother used to answer calls for him. The behavior fit 2 specific men in that group, almost too precisely to be coincidence. But if this sighting was real, if 2 or 3 or 4 of the boys were alive and well enough to walk into a store and buy food a full day after vanishing, then somewhere between that store and the mountains, where their bodies would eventually be found, something changed. Something took 4 healthy men and turned them into 4 corpses scattered across 11 miles of wilderness. It would be nearly 4 months before anyone found out. June 4th. The snowpack had finally melted enough for a group of motorcyclists to reach a remote Forest Service maintenance trailer, nearly 20 miles from where the car had been left. The trailer's front window was shattered. Inside, the smell told them before their eyes did. It was Ted Wire, or what remained of him. He was on the bed, wrapped carefully in 8 sheets, pulled up and over his body by someone else's hands, because his feet, black with frostbite and gangrene, would have been agony to touch. An autopsy showed he had likely survived up to 3 months inside that trailer. Beside him on a small table, his wallet untouched, cash still inside, a ring engraved with his name, and a gold watch that wasn't his. No one has ever explained whose it was or how it got there. His own shoes were missing. Days later, searchers found Madruga and Sterling on opposite sides of the road, over 11 miles from the trailer, reduced to bone. 2 days after that, Hewitt's father found his son's remains under a bush less than 2 miles away. His skull recovered a few hundred feet further on. 4 men, dead of hypothermia and starvation, scattered across a landscape that made no geographic sense for how they traveled it. The 5th man, Gary Mathias, was never found. What makes Ted Wire's death almost impossible to accept isn't the cold. It's what was around him while he died. The trailer had a working fireplace. Matches sat untouched beside it. Paperback novels, perfect kindling, stacked nearby, never burned. Heavy forestry coats hung in storage, warm enough to save a man's life, left exactly where they were. Outside, in a shed feet from the door, investigators found dehydrated rations, food to keep 5 men alive for an entire year. The locker holding it had never been opened. A separate tank held butane that could have fed the trailer's heater directly. Its valve was never touched. Instead, 3 dozen cans of sea rations from a different, smaller supply had been opened, using a P-38 military can opener. Only 2 men in that group had any familiarity with military-issue equipment: Jack Madruga and Gary Mathias, who had served in the U.S. Army in West Germany before being discharged following a psychiatric diagnosis, and Matthias's own sneakers were left behind in that trailer, which raises the question investigators still can't answer. If Weyer's shoes were missing and Matthias's shoes were sitting right there, did Gary Matthias walk out of that trailer wearing a dead friend's shoes into the wilderness alone? Here's what investigators believe. As much as belief can substitute for certainty, they think the group, trying to visit friends of Matthias's in a nearby town, took a wrong turn in the dark near Oroville and ended up on that mountain road by accident, not intention. When the car became stuck, rather than backtrack toward the one lodge they'd already passed, they chose to keep going forward, deeper into the mountains, following snowcat tracks left behind by a Forest Service vehicle the day before. Tracks that may have looked, in the dark, like a path to safety. They believe Madruga, Sterling, and eventually Hewitt died first, somewhere along that 11-mile walk, one after another, hypothermia closing in as the cold overtook exhausted, underdressed bodies. They believe Weyer and Matthias reached the trailer together, that Matthias broke the window to get them both inside. That fear of arrest, fear of trespassing on a locked federal building, may have stopped them from touching supplies that would have saved Weyer's life, and possibly Matthias's too. And they believe that at some point, believing Weyer was already dead, or dying beyond saving, Gary Matthias made a choice. He put on someone else's shoes, and he walked out alone into a wilderness that has never given him back. Nearly 50 years later, Gary Matthias remains missing. No remains, no sightings that ever held up, no explanation for a watch that wasn't Weyer's sitting on a table beside a dying man. Some who work the case still believe there's a version of this story involving other people entirely, the ones in the dark, ignoring Joseph Shanz's cries for help. Others believe the mountain did what mountains do, and 5 ordinary men simply made one wrong turn too many into a place that doesn't forgive mistakes. What 5 friends who looked out for each other their entire lives ended up scattered across a landscape that swallowed 4 of them whole and erased the 5th completely. And somewhere in those 11 miles between an abandoned car and a locked trailer, something happened that no piece of evidence has ever fully explained. We may never know what it was, but we know this: whatever it was not an accident that a healthy young man could not survive. It was something else, and it's still out there, unanswered in the cold.